My boyfriend is very responsible. When the one that got away had an unwed pregnancy, he swore, "I'll be the dad." I questioned their exact relationship, and he calmly stated they were deeply loyal friends. So her child was his child. Since that was the case, I put a vasectomy brochure in his hand. "You already have a child anyway, isn't it a waste to keep this ability?" I went with my boyfriend Benjamin to celebrate his birthday for Grandpa Henry. That day, before the family dinner started, he disappeared. Before he vanished, the last person he texted was Sage, his childhood friend. "I'm pregnant." "Whose?" "I don't know." Their conversation was only 3 short lines, but it could combine into countless possibilities. I stared at the tablet Benjamin had left in the car, feeling a chill run through me, unable to stop my mind from racing, his mother's urging still ringing in my ears. "Benjamin, where did that child run off to? Grace, quickly find him and bring him back." Celebrating Grandpa Henry's birthday is a big deal. When he invited me to celebrate his birthday as his fiancée, Benjamin said Grandpa Henry hadn't been well lately, and this was likely his last milestone birthday, so it was very important. Yet less than 2 minutes after arriving at the hotel, he was gone. I knew Benjamin and Sage had been good friends for over 10 years. If Sage had a problem, Benjamin would naturally be concerned. But was it so urgent that he'd abandon Grandpa Henry's 80th birthday? Or was their friendship just a facade? I drove to Sage's art studio, not just because I was asked to, but because I needed to know why Benjamin would do this. When the car stopped, my legs felt weak, and my eyes were burning. Whether it led to a fight or me losing my mind, I needed to know the truth. My hand trembled slightly as I pushed open the art studio door, due to nervousness. Benjamin was indeed there. He was always gentle and composed. In the over a year we'd been dating, he had never lost his temper once. But at this moment, the nice guy was cursing loudly at Sage, furious. "Are you out of your mind? Get rid of it." As the main character of the incident, Sage seemed much calmer. She bent down, pulled a cigarette from the pack on the floor, and slowly lit it. "I'll do whatever I want. You can't tell me what to do." As smoke swirled, Benjamin froze for 3 seconds, then grabbed the cigarette from her hand, threw it on the ground, and stomped it out. "You're pregnant and still smoking." In his tone, besides anger, there was also a strange hint of compromise and helplessness. It was at that moment that I stepped on a raised floorboard, making a creaking sound. Benjamin and Sage both turned around simultaneously. There was no hiding, so I walked in, steeling myself. "Aunt Eleanor asked me to find you." The instant Benjamin saw me, he returned to his usual calm self. He came over and said softly, "You could have just called me. Why did you come all this way?" "I couldn't reach you. I called you 13 times before I found you." Benjamin suddenly understood, then patiently explained that his phone was on silent. "Sorry, I didn't hear it." The Benjamin I knew had always been so composed and emotionally stable. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed he could lose his temper, let alone curse. My gaze fell on the woman with red lips and black hair. She ran her fingers through her waist-length hair and called out my name directly. "Grace, please take your boyfriend away. All this arguing here is annoying me." We had met several times before, and Sage had always been lukewarm towards me. Benjamin had explained then that she was naturally aloof, and I hadn't thought much of it. But now, I suddenly felt a bit annoyed. A guest should be treated politely. At least a polite greeting would have been appropriate. However, Benjamin stood rooted, showing no sign of leaving. In the awkward silence, I heard myself ask, "I think I just heard you two arguing. Why don't you tell me about it, and maybe I can offer some advice?" Rather than speculate, it was better to ask directly. As Benjamin's fiancée, I naturally had the right to ask questions. Even the calmest person will inadvertently reveal tells when lying, and I would then painstakingly peel back the layers to find an explanation that made me happy. Benjamin furrowed his brow and denied in a low voice, "We weren't arguing." But Sage very naturally said, "Don't misunderstand, my child isn't Benjamin's." Half of my heart relaxed, but the other half remained tense. Why was Benjamin so anxious about a child that wasn't his? Among Benjamin's many friends, Sage was the most wild and unconventional. And among Sage's many friends, Benjamin was the most cautious and steady. Two people with such opposite personalities had become friends who confide in each other. As his girlfriend, I hadn't minded before because Sage's partners were either romantic, free-spirited artists or wealthy elites. The latter somewhat overlapped with Benjamin, but after he took over his family business, it coincided with an industry downturn. He had to fight with all his might to avoid bankruptcy. Where would he find time for romance? It wasn't until he was almost 30 that he was pressured into blind dates by his family, and then met me. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and when both families discussed marriage, everything fell into place naturally. If it weren't for Sage's unwed pregnancy, which made Benjamin lose his composure, I would never have realized that my fiancé had such a loyal side. Benjamin turned around and earnestly pleaded, "Sage, don't make a scene. You're still young. Why do you have to have a child now and tie down your life?" These words were heartfelt, yet Sage seemed utterly unimpressed. She raised an eyebrow and casually remarked, "I have to keep this child. If I get rid of it, I won't be able to get pregnant for the rest of my life." At this moment, Benjamin's arm, which I was holding, was stiff and cold, like a stone sculpture. He struggled to speak. "How is that possible? Go to a few more hospitals. It might be a misdiagnosis." Sage simply turned back and stared at the painting in front of him. He was a professional painter who ran this small art studio for a living. I suddenly didn't understand. These are modern times, and Sage is a mentally competent adult woman. Since she decided to have a child, her decision should be respected. Why was Benjamin so resistant? The three of us fell into silence until my phone rang again. I handed it directly to Benjamin, letting him respond to his mother's urging himself. After all, with family matters, Benjamin had to leave. Before walking out, I looked back at Sage one last time, my hands resting on my still flat abdomen, my gaze deep and thoughtful. Benjamin had always been unfazed by challenges. Ever since leaving Sage's art studio, he had put on his polished and appropriate smile again. I had seen that expression countless times before, and it looked no different today. But in those past days, had there also been undercurrents I didn't know about, just like today? I dared not think. Logic told me to trust my fiancé, but the engagement ring on my finger felt like a red-hot branding iron, unbearable. The valet waited by my car, reaching out for the keys, but I put my hands in my pockets and said expressionlessly, "Let's talk for 5 minutes first." He frowned, looking a little anxious. "Everyone's waiting for me for Grandpa Henry's birthday." "So am I. Everyone's waiting for you because you chatted with Sage for 2 hours, but another 5 minutes with me won't make much difference. If you want to leave, answer me first." An unwed pregnancy by a friend of the opposite sex, and she plans to be a single mother. How does that concern you? Are you and Sage really just ordinary friends? On the busy street, my expression, tone, and body language were all very restrained, but I knew Benjamin could sense my anger. He didn't answer immediately but remained silent for a full 30 seconds before saying solemnly, "I know your concerns. Sage and I have absolutely no romantic entanglement. I'm worried about the child in her belly. If a child is destined to not receive a father's respect and love, perhaps they shouldn't be born. For example, if I had the chance to meet my mother 30 years ago, I would also tell her, 'Please reconsider, don't let me be born.' I'm afraid the child born would become another me who was isolated by peers because I didn't have a father." He had bared his heart, leaving me in a difficult position. I knew about Benjamin's family situation. His mother had an unwed pregnancy back then and eloped for love, but his father later abandoned his wife and child, which was widely condemned. Mother and son relied on each other, suffering greatly, and it was truly pitiful. So Benjamin's anger stemmed from not wanting his friend to repeat the same mistakes, which was perfectly reasonable. Seeing my expression soften, Benjamin took another step forward and gently comforted me. "But regardless, I was too impulsive this time and scared you, Grace. Don't worry, I promise I won't do it again." Benjamin's attitude was sincere, and I wasn't an unreasonable person. I handed him the keys, tacitly accepting his explanation. This little interlude was quickly forgotten by everyone. In the private dining room, Grandpa Henry held his grandson's hand and earnestly instructed, "Benjamin, you must work hard and treat Grace well in the future." Benjamin agreed to everything. I stood 2 steps away, quietly observing him. Benjamin perfectly played the role of a filial grandson, as if his earlier outburst over Sage had been my imagination. On the other side, Benjamin's Grandpa Henry was already saying, "Next, have a child with Grace soon, so I can have 4 generations together." Everyone laughed, but Benjamin didn't. He just raised his glass and drained it. That evening, Benjamin drank a lot of wine and liquor. With or without encouragement, he drank glass after glass, finally reeking of alcohol. Benjamin's mother, fearing I'd be unhappy, laughed repeatedly. Today is a special day, so he drank more. He's not usually like this. Yes, he's not usually like this, and today is indeed a special day, because he knows Sage plans to have a child destined for unhappiness. Despite making the excuse to put myself in his shoes, Benjamin's behavior still disappointed me. Even if Sage is determined, and he can't convince him they're both adults, and Sage chose his own path. At most, Benjamin can offer respect and well wishes. Are we supposed to worry about our friends our entire lives? Or is friend just an excuse? Of course, I could check Benjamin's phone, go through his social media accounts, or even discreetly inquire with his friends about any ambiguous relationship with Sage. But the process of doing those things would make me feel sordid, and I didn't want to become that kind of person. My heart grew more and more agitated, and I lost my appetite. I bid Aunt Eleanor farewell, and left in a hurry. The next day at work, I still didn't text Benjamin, which was unprecedented since we started dating. Benjamin quickly sensed something was off with me. At the end of the workday, I saw him at the office entrance. Let's grab a bite. Don't always go on an empty stomach, you'll get a stomachache. He was always this thoughtful, and I was indeed ready to talk to him again. However, as soon as I got in the car, Benjamin suddenly took a call, and his expression immediately turned serious. He hung up, then hesitated before suggesting, Sage swallowed sleeping pills and is having his stomach pumped at the hospital. Grace, maybe we shouldn't eat yet, let's go see him together. Just now he was telling me not to go on an empty stomach, and now for Sage, dining has to be postponed. But a friend's suicide attempt is naturally more important than his fiancée getting a stomachache from hunger. The car sped along, making me dizzy in the passenger seat. I had just been trying my best to convince myself not to dwell on it, but when Benjamin ran a red light for the third time, almost hitting a pedestrian, I truly got angry. Slow down. You're not a doctor. What's the rush? Benjamin retorted without thinking, but I'm his friend. This was not the first time he had emphasized the keyword friend, as if saying it for my benefit, and perhaps for his own, as if stressing it enough would make us all accept it as truth. I sneered. What ordinary friend is worth you running red lights and disregarding your own safety and your fiancé's? Benjamin paused, finally steadying the car's speed. When we arrived at the hospital, Sage was out of danger and receiving an 4 drip. Benjamin's tone held considerable anger. What's wrong with you? Why suddenly feel so desperate? Suicidal over a man? Are you still the Sage I know, who dared to love and hate? The person in the hospital ward gave a bitter smile when he saw him, then sighed with a worried expression. You misunderstood. It's not because of a man. I'm worried about how I'll balance work if I have this baby. Will the child be discriminated against at school for not having a father? After all, you were bullied that way back then too. Benjamin, maybe I'm not fit to be a good mother. Perhaps I should just get rid of it. Is it really not a big deal if I can never have children again? What can I do if fate isn't kind to me? At this point, a clear tear slid from the corner of her eye. At this moment, Sage was without makeup, her long hair disheveled, her expression sorrowful. Even I found her somewhat pitiable, and Benjamin blurted out, It's okay, I'll be a good father. Only after speaking did he realize how abrupt he had been, and he quickly corrected his wording. You can give birth without worry. I'll be the child's godfather and ensure he grows up healthy. When you're busy, you can send the child to me. If anyone bullies him at school, I'll stand up for him. I'll also spend every birthday with him, and you can call me for parent-teacher conferences. From now on, your child is my child. Benjamin was a man of his word. My cousin introduced him to me, saying he was steady and rarely made promises, but when he did, he always followed through. Even I knew Benjamin was reliable, let alone Sage, who had known him for years. Sage's eyes instantly welled up, and he choked out, If that's true, that would be wonderful. But his gaze swept over me, standing beside Benjamin, and he immediately smiled and shook his head again. Aren't you going to ask if Grace agrees? Both looked at me. Benjamin's voice was already pleading. Grace, will you be the child's godmother with me, please? I said calmly, Benjamin, do whatever you want. But first, break up with me, and then go be the father of his child. At my words, both their faces fell. Benjamin was so anxious he kept giving me frantic glances, afraid I would provoke Sage further in the hospital ward. I also instinctively patted Sage's bed and said goodbye. This isn't about you. I just have poor judgment and chose a boyfriend who irritates me. Get some rest, I'm leaving. I wasn't someone who disliked children. In fact, when my best friend gave birth to her soft, sweet daughter, I held and kissed her repeatedly, unable to let go. But that didn't mean I was willing to suddenly become a mother. I turned and walked away. Benjamin chased after me, grabbing my arm. Can't you calm down? Grace, weren't you always the most sensible and well-behaved? You're not impulsive and reckless like Sage. What's wrong with you now? It was clear that the man who was always gentle and composed had finally dropped his facade. Sensible and well-behaved, that sounds like a compliment. A sensible person must tolerate others' absurdities, swallow their own grievances, and ultimately create a false impression of a peaceful and carefree life. A well-behaved person is weak, lacks initiative, allows others to control them, and doesn't even notice anything amiss. But a person who causes trouble can act recklessly and have a friend who devotedly cleans up their messes. It sounds like causing trouble is better for one's mental health. Of course, I valued the opinions of those I loved, but if I had to suppress my own feelings to get their approval, then something was definitely wrong. Someone who truly loved me would never make me suffer. I pulled away from Benjamin's grasp and lifted my head, showing no weakness. You're the one who can't calm down, aren't you? You're the one who ran away from Grandpa Henry's birthday party, and you're the one who changed our date to go to the hospital. You're running around trying to be a father to someone else's child. That's what can't calm down means, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken, dating is a mutual choice. You are my boyfriend now and my future husband. I cannot accept you taking on the responsibilities of a father before we're even married. You have your sense of responsibility, and I have my limits. So why make things difficult for each other? Wouldn't it be better if we just went our separate ways? I pressed him with every word, and Benjamin had no answer. He pinched his temples, looking exhausted. Sage and I have been friends for so many years. It's perfectly normal for his child to recognize me as godfather. Your best friend had a daughter, and you became a godmother to someone else's child. Why are you being so hypocritical? What's more, Sage saved my life. I can't just ignore him. I paused for a moment. Indeed, Benjamin had mentioned to me that he had been bullied by classmates since childhood. In high school, some even forced him to clean toilets and tore up his exam admission ticket. Among the few friends who supported him, Sage was one of them. Sage had done him a favor, and I had no objection to him repaying it, but why choose this particular way, which was so easily misunderstood? I said coldly. How is raising his child repaying a debt? Why don't you just offer yourself to him? After all, that's how romantic novels have been written for centuries. You'd just be adding a new twist. Just as we were arguing, the hospital ward suddenly erupted. Several sharp female voices pierced the quiet night. I'll kill you, homewrecker. If you have the guts to find a man, don't hide. The sound came from Sage's hospital ward. Benjamin rushed over without a backward glance. I also froze for 3 seconds, then followed, wanting to see what was happening. The woman leading the charge was already swinging her hands, leaving 2 slap marks on Sage's face. At the ward door, Benjamin pushed through the crowd and roared. What are you doing? Stop it. The woman who had been hitting Sage showed no sign of nervousness. She turned around, lifted her chin and said haughtily, Let me explain the relationship. I'm his legal wife, he's the other woman, so of course I'll hit him if I want. Who are you to stop me? Previously, I thought Sage didn't know who the child's father was, or that the father was unwilling to take responsibility. But I never imagined the father of the child in her belly was a married man. And from Sage's expression, although he seemed wronged, he wasn't surprised, so he clearly knew all along. Before, when he told Benjamin he didn't know who the child's father was, it was just an excuse. And Benjamin, he was clearly stunned. I don't know what he was thinking in that moment, but he still stood in front of Sage, speaking up for him. As long as I'm here, you are not allowed to harass my friend. Through the crowd, I saw his slightly stiff back. He was protecting his friend, and he must have felt incredibly noble at that moment. Unfortunately, I only found it ridiculous and absurd. The farce ended with the hospital calling the police. While Benjamin was giving his statement, the nurse applied medicine to Sage's facial injuries. Whether intentional or not, his legal wife's nails were a bit sharp, scratching a small piece of Sage's skin. The nurse's movements were a little rough. Sage hissed in pain, but the nurse had a knowing, half-smile on her face. Oh, does your face hurt? I thought you weren't afraid of pain. Everyone could see the nurse's contempt. Sage's face went white with anger, but who was to blame? People naturally side with justice. Since Sage had the nerve to disrupt someone's family, he should bear the consequences. Since Benjamin liked cleaning up messes, he could continue to cover for him. As for me, I wanted to be as far away from them as possible. After leaving the hospital, I blocked Benjamin's contact information. We had been dating with the intention of marriage, had recently visited each other's parents, and even set a wedding date. At the time, I was overjoyed, thinking I had met the love of my life. Now I only regretted the hassle that came with breaking up. When I explained the reason for the breakup to my parents, they criticized me for acting on my own initiative. It's not a matter of principle. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? I held my head, suppressing my anger, and argued with my parents. Even the ancients knew to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Why wouldn't he? I hated Benjamin's inability to distinguish right from wrong, but my parents were worried about losing an eligible bachelor. My mother glanced at my father, then hesitated before continuing to persuade me. Even if there's something going on between them, so what? She can't have Benjamin's child, and she can't shake your position. Once you have your own children, Benjamin will know who's closer and who's more distant, and you won't have to worry at all. Benjamin's family is 10 times better off than ours. If you miss him, you won't find another one this good. It's your good fortune that his family's financial situation is willing to consider you, daughter. You should cherish it. My father also tried to scare me. You're 25. You don't have time to be picky. Just settle for someone. It seemed Benjamin's financial strength greatly pleased my parents, to the point where they put their daughter's happiness out of their minds. My eyebrows furrowed in anger, and I almost yelled at my mother, but my gaze fell on her thin, withered hands, and I couldn't bring myself to speak harshly to her. My mother was very frail. The year I graduated college, she suddenly had a stroke, disrupting all my plans. I had originally planned to pursue graduate studies, but to be able to care for my mother nearby, I returned to my hometown and found a relaxed teaching job. For the past 3 years, I had put in a lot of effort to help my mother with rehabilitation, but I was doing it for her good, so why wouldn't she think of me? I held back tears and said, I don't want to argue with you anymore. It's a waste of time. Anyway, breaking up is my business. Notifying you is already me going above and beyond. From a young age, I realized I had a quick mind, spoke articulately, and couldn't tolerate injustice. If I saw someone cutting in line, I would always speak up to stop them. If I encountered unreliable colleagues at work, I would speak up for what's right. Even though I really liked Benjamin, if his actions didn't align with my values, I would never back down. But the only place I couldn't fully use my strengths was at home. Because my parents always treated me like a child. They believed I was naive and immature, perpetually lacking social experience, and always needing their guidance. When I tried to reason with them, they would simply say they were the ones with reason. I couldn't stay in this home for a moment longer. I went out to a park and started calling the wedding photos vendor to demand a refund. But they were a tough one and absolutely refused to refund. My head buzzed with anger, and I snapped, Fine, then you can wait for me to file a complaint with the Consumer Protection Agency. Submitting a complaint required providing the contract and payment receipt, which, by coincidence, were at Benjamin's home. To avoid running into him, I specifically chose a time when he wasn't home to retrieve the documents. The key turned, and the house was filled with cigarette smoke. Benjamin had mild mysophobia. If he ate a strong-smelling takeout meal in his home, he would open all the doors and windows. Who could be smoking in his house? As I wondered, a woman's giggles came from the bedroom. My steps halted mid-air. Sure enough, it was Sage. And in the living room, several worn jackets and used towels were strewn about. Why was Sage staying at Benjamin's home? He was probably chatting with someone, saying smugly, Yes, that woman did come and make a scene, but I'm not afraid. She's just displaying impotent rage. I'm young and beautiful, and he's aging and losing his looks. Once the baby is born, I'm sure I can replace him. I'm very safe now. A friend lent me a place to stay. The voice abruptly stopped. The woman, dressed in a wine-red nightgown, walked out, staring at me in astonishment. Grace, what are you doing here? Shouldn't I be asking that question? Sure enough, Sage was avoiding his legal wife, but he had plenty of other places to go. Why choose to stay at Benjamin's home? Even if it's a friend staying over, unmarried individuals should be discreet, shouldn't they? But this wasn't the time to be angry. I slowly broke into a smile. Sage, long time no see. Are you feeling better? I had a belly full of anger over the breakup, being blamed by my family. Yet Sage was comfortably living in Benjamin's home, resting and avoiding his legal wife's shouting. It just felt incredibly unfair. I didn't understand how right and wrong could be twisted like this. I had lived a proper life for half my life. Why should I suffer like this because of Sage? I knew it was wrong to displace anger, but I wasn't a saint. Occasionally making a mistake could be forgiven. Anyway, I couldn't let Benjamin and Sage, these lifelong friends, off so easily. They had to pay a price. So I pretended not to have heard Sage's phone call at all and said enthusiastically, I wanted to give Benjamin a surprise and came to tidy up his room. I didn't expect you to be here. Sage and Benjamin confide in each other, so I presumed Benjamin had told him about our breakup. So he was a little wary, but still politely said, I'm much better. As for you and Benjamin, I'm too lazy to get involved. You can wait for him to get off work and talk to him yourself. His words sounded like those of a homeowner, which Benjamin had given him the confidence to assume. I sat on the sofa, my gaze sweeping over the scattered shopping bags and chip bags on the coffee table, feeling increasingly downhearted. Benjamin had personally designed and decorated this house. He truly cherished it. He had even subtly asked me not to eat in the living room, because crumbs were hard to clean from the carpet. But his principles were clearly just for show. Why would someone be so demanding of his girlfriend, yet repeatedly given to a female friend? If that's the case, why even have a girlfriend? Wouldn't it be more perfect to just spend his life with a female friend? Benjamin would probably soon be able to live that kind of life completely. I not only concealed my resentment very well, but even after Benjamin came home from work, I solemnly promised him that we would both be good to Sage. This child will enter the world with the prejudices of others. He must be so pitiful. It's his blessing to have one more person to love him, isn't it? Besides, you're a big man. You might overlook some things in caring for him, and I can help with that. My speech moved Benjamin. He breathed a sigh of relief. Grace, you really are the kindest person I've ever met. I'll cherish you properly from now on. I nodded repeatedly, indicating I was very touched. Benjamin looked back at Sage, making sure he couldn't hear, then lowered his voice and added, Actually, you're right. Sage is impulsive and has no plans for his life. I'm also very troubled by it. I hope he gets through this challenge and gets better and better. That was truly an interesting thing to say. Sage was 30 years old. His personality hadn't changed in 30 years. Would having a child change it? Today you help him with one thing. Tomorrow he'll have 10 more waiting for you. Just now it was only about being the child's godfather. And now Benjamin had to take care of the mother too. All because Sage said, my own apartment was just renovated, and the kitchen smells. Benjamin generously offered to let him stay at his home temporarily. And because Sage said, I want to be a strong and independent mother, Benjamin willingly took on all the burdens of his foreign infant's early days. If Benjamin spoke and acted reasonably, I would grab his ear and tell him, this friend of yours is taking you for a fool. But he was unconditionally protecting his friend, so why waste my breath? All I wanted now was to make sure my plan would work. Over the next month or two, I demonstrated the qualities an excellent fiancé should possess. Sending soup and water to Sage, accompanying him to hospital checkups, buying baby clothes and toys online, and delivering them all to Benjamin's home, and even dragging Benjamin to parenting classes. Although he found it troublesome, seeing how seriously I took it, his friend's child praised me for being virtuous. All of the above was charged to Benjamin's credit card. He had given me a supplementary credit card earlier as a show of sincerity, but I was very principled and had never used it. Now he was spending money, and I was building my reputation. It was indeed a good deal. With each gift delivered home, Sage gradually let down his guard. He became a bit closer to me than before, but only verbally, offering a thank you or two. I saw no genuine gestures of goodwill from him. Benjamin once questioned me, saying that since I was a godmother to my friend's child, why wasn't I willing to be the godmother to Sage's child? This was the answer. When I cared for my best friend Chloe, buying her this and that, she would reciprocate with gifts of equal value. But Sage not only accepted everything but also asked if there was anything better or more expensive. I kept all my emotions about Sage well contained because all this groundwork was for a specific arrangement. One day after work, I picked up a brochure from the hospital and urged Benjamin to read it. The brochure was colorful, and Benjamin read it for a long time before asking, somewhat confused, "This is a vasectomy brochure. Did you pick up the wrong one?" I looked innocent. "No, I didn't pick up the wrong one. I want you to get sterilized. No man could endure such an arrangement." He immediately frowned, his voice becoming urgent. "Nonsense. Why should I get a vasectomy?" "Of course you should. It's convenient, you see. We originally agreed to only have one child after marriage, but now Sage has a child, and he wants us to be godparents, so we already have a child, effectively. What's the point of keeping your fertility then? It's so much simpler to just get it done." Benjamin's face turned purple, but he couldn't refute me. What could he say? Criticize me for giving up our future biological child for a non-biological one? Then I would say, your friendship with Sage is eternal. Whether a child is biological or not doesn't matter. Question vasectomy harming himself? But the hospital brochure clearly stated that the procedure was safe, painless, and had no side effects. At this moment, the more sincere my expression, the more powerless Benjamin was to argue. He finally just stammered. Well, it's all the same to me, but it's not the same for you. Didn't they say that maternal love forms during pregnancy? Sage is risking everything to have his own child, Grace. Don't you have that same desire? Are you afraid I won't accept a non-biological child? Then why did you make me the godmother of Sage's child? If we're going to have a child no matter what, then why did you urge me to accept your friend's child? Or do you want a biological child, but also want to show off your boundless sense of responsibility for a non-biological one? At this point, I could have lost my temper, but I chose my anger carefully. I slapped Benjamin hard on the head. How dare you question my sincerity towards Sage? Benjamin, I've poured my heart into taking care of him these past few weeks. The house is full of baby products I bought. Are you blind, or can't you see? It's true that mothers carry a child for 10 months, but fathers don't have to endure such hardship. Does that mean you conclude there's any difference between paternal and maternal love? Then, aside from those 10 months of carrying him, there's no difference between a biological mother and a godmother. So Sage's child is my child. Since I have a child, isn't it perfectly reasonable for you to get a vasectomy? Benjamin couldn't deny my efforts, nor could he come up with a valid reason to refuse the vasectomy. He could only prevaricate, let's talk about it later. There's plenty of time. But I was relentless, deliberately pulling Sage in to make him mediate. Benjamin, it's very convenient that you invited your good friend to stay at your home. Haven't I treated you well? Sage, you have to help me scold Benjamin. During this time, Sage's pregnancy was showing, and he looked swollen and quite haggard. The art studio was closed, and he had nothing to do all day but scroll on his phone and play games. Benjamin once subtly asked him if he wanted him to bring his painting supplies to pass the time. But Sage just held his stomach and said, I'm tired. I don't want to move. Sage, of course, couldn't afford to offend the friend who was providing free housing. He immediately played peacemaker. Don't you two argue anymore, I have a headache. Benjamin instantly had an excuse to tell me not to bring up the matter, and he even secretly tore up that brochure and threw it in the trash. He thought that would be the end of it, but he was truly overthinking things. There was no way I would let it go. I would wait for the next opportunity to bring it up again. During this time, I had Chloe look into it. Benjamin and Sage were high school classmates, both enjoyed painting. However, Sage eventually went the art school route, while Benjamin, under his family's strict insistence, gave up his ambition to study art. Yet they had once studied painting side by side at an institution. Many people had witnessed this. Some other boys even bothered Sage, and Benjamin had stood up for him. Perhaps it was those undefinable teenage feelings that he couldn't let go of. Everyone experiences unrequited love sometimes, and I'm not one to dwell on the past. It's like driving. While you might occasionally glance in the rearview mirror, you always have to move forward. The road ahead is what matters most. If you want to openly defend your youthful crush, no one will stop you. But why, after finding a girlfriend, do you make no changes? I can overlook Benjamin's past relationships, but I can't stand the desecration and neglect of our current relationship under the guise of nostalgia. This incident even served as another wake-up call for me. Although I love my parents, we have entirely different views on marriage and careers. Before, while caring for my mother, I hadn't paid attention to these differences. But now, seeing Benjamin and me reconcile, their beaming faces filled me with a sense of sadness. Perhaps my parents and I were destined to only maintain a comfortable distance. I tried contacting my university advisor. Back then, I ranked high in the entrance exams and thought I was set, until my mother suddenly had a heart attack, and I gave up the opportunity to study, returning to my hometown to help her recover. Now my mother's mobility is almost back to normal. I had mentioned to my mother that I wanted to continue my studies, but she said, why pursue dreams when you can live a stable life? On top of that, wedding planning errands had left me no time to be distracted. Now, with a blessing in disguise, I found the courage to go all in. Fortunately, my advisor still remembered me, and he encouraged me to reapply, which put my mind at ease. Breaking up wasn't my only goal. Living a better life after the breakup was my ultimate objective. I contacted my former classmates and friends and got study materials. But focused studying required an undisturbed space, so I applied for a dorm room at the school and moved all my study materials in. My parents thought I was moving out to make it easier to date Benjamin, so even though they didn't want me to leave, they didn't object. The dorm room conditions were very poor. It didn't have a private bathroom, and even dust fell from the ceiling, but I didn't care about the material conditions. During breaks from practice problems, I'd also open my phone. I followed Sage's social media account. She had changed her name to Inspirational Young Single Mom and posted daily updates on her pregnancy, gaining thousands of followers. Sage lived in Benjamin's spacious apartment, enjoying a peaceful and carefree life of leisure every day. Meanwhile, I was holed up in a simple, cramped dorm room, poring over dry textbook problems. Anyone would find the former more pleasant, so when I struggled to study, I'd fall into self-doubt. What am I even doing this for? Why do I have to argue about right and wrong? If I just closed my eyes and adopted an out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach, wouldn't life still go smoothly? Just like my parents had advised me, Benjamin will mature. Once he has his own flesh and blood, he won't care whether Sage and her child live or die. But I still couldn't convince myself to bet my future on someone else's conscience. I only trusted myself. A few days later was Thanksgiving. On such holidays, the family would gather in Grandpa Henry's hospital ward, and this was exactly the opportunity one had been waiting for. The more people there were, the livelier the atmosphere. Benjamin's mother and I arrived at the hospital early to decorate. Grandpa Henry's hospital room had 2 sections, an outer area for guests where flowers and fruit needed to be arranged. Aunt Eleanor liked to ask me to lend a hand on such occasions. Before, I used to think it was a waste of time, but I figured if I did more, the elders would have less to do, and I saw no issue with that. But only now did it belatedly dawn on me. Why was Aunt Eleanor so particular about Benjamin? Before her son met me, had no one in the He family ever done any work? Besides, regarding fruit, couldn't whoever wanted to eat it just wash it themselves? Why did it have to be washed, cut, and arranged beforehand? Every little chore I did was actually quite meaningless. It was merely to make Benjamin's mother feel more comfortable. The source of her comfort was my obedience to her preferences. Seeing through all this, I told myself not to get angry and to consider the bigger picture, while also confirming with my best friend the time for her to call me. So, halfway through decorating, my phone suddenly rang. I mysteriously slipped away to answer it, and seeing Aunt Eleanor standing nearby in my peripheral vision, I deliberately raised my voice. No, it has to be formaldehyde-free material, otherwise it will harm the baby. Yes, the delivery address is Maplewood Heights, Unit 1. My friend, suppressing her voice, asked me, "Did that woman hear? Should I hang up now?" I replied with a smile. "Okay, goodbye." Ordering baby products to Benjamin's home surely meant good news. Sure enough, as soon as I hung up, Aunt Eleanor scurried over, a mix of surprise and joy on her face, hands clasped to her chest, almost twirling with delight. "Grace, you truly are something. Why didn't you tell us about the good news sooner? Aren't you afraid of overworking yourself? How many months along are you now? We'll move the wedding date forward right away, to ensure you have a grand wedding before you start showing." I countered with a puzzled expression. "Showing what? Aunt Eleanor, I'm not pregnant." Aunt Eleanor's smile split in half. "Then what did you mean by baby and formaldehyde just now?" Our eyes met, and I chuckled, slapping my forehead. "It's a misunderstanding. I was talking about a friend's baby." Evidently, Benjamin's mother was a bit disappointed, but she maintained her polished and appropriate smile. "Well, that's fine too, but you should still work hard. You see, Benjamin isn't getting any younger. Having a baby soon would also make Grandpa Henry happy." How could I not understand Aunt Eleanor's intentions? The firm was founded by Grandpa Henry, and now that his health was deteriorating, the family was waiting for Grandpa Henry to issue a formal document to determine the firm's successor. Although Benjamin was highly regarded, he still had an aunt, who also had a recently graduated son. At such a time, having a stable and warm family setup as a backup would earn points, which is why Aunt Eleanor had pressured her son into blind dates. Benjamin, though appearing gentle and composed, had repeatedly dodged these attempts, only agreeing when he met me. Aunt Eleanor was overjoyed because of this and looked upon me favorably. But now her plans were thwarted, because I waved my hand and chuckled. "Aunt Eleanor, I'm not going to have children." Aunt Eleanor jumped, stumbled 2 steps, and almost lost her balance. "You can't say such things. You're a teacher. How can you not have children?" The art studio was closed, and he had nothing to do all day but scroll on his phone and play games. Benjamin once subtly asked him if he wanted him to bring his painting supplies to pass the time, but Sage just held his stomach and said, "I'm tired. I don't want to move." Sage, of course, couldn't afford to offend the friend who was providing free housing. He immediately played peacemaker. "Don't you two argue anymore, I have a headache." Benjamin instantly had an excuse to tell me not to bring up the matter, and he even secretly tore up that brochure and threw it in the trash. He thought that would be the end of it, but he was truly overthinking things. There was no way I would let it go. I would wait for the next opportunity to bring it up again. During this time, I had Chloe look into it. Benjamin and Sage were high school classmates. Both enjoyed painting. However, Sage eventually went the art school route, while Benjamin, under his family's strict insistence, gave up his ambition to study art. Yet they had once studied painting side by side at an institution. Many people had witnessed this. Some other boys even bothered Sage, and Benjamin had stood up for him. Perhaps it was those undefinable teenage feelings that he couldn't let go of. Everyone experiences unrequited love sometimes, and I'm not one to dwell on the past. It's like driving. While you might occasionally glance in the rearview mirror, you always have to move forward. The road ahead is what matters most. If you want to openly defend your youthful crush, no one will stop you. But why, after finding a girlfriend, do you make no changes? I can overlook Benjamin's past relationships, but I can't stand the desecration and neglect of our current relationship under the guise of nostalgia. This incident even served as another wake-up call for me. Although I love my parents, we have entirely different views on marriage and careers. Before, while caring for my mother, I hadn't paid attention to these differences. But now, seeing Benjamin and me reconcile, their beaming faces filled me with a sense of sadness. Perhaps my parents and I were destined to only maintain a comfortable distance. I tried contacting my university advisor. Back then, I ranked high in the entrance exams and thought I was set, until my mother suddenly had a heart attack, and I gave up the opportunity to study, returning to my hometown to help her recover. Now, my mother's mobility is almost back to normal. I had mentioned to my mother that I wanted to continue my studies, but she said, "Why pursue dreams when you can live a stable life?" On top of that, wedding planning errands had left me no time to be distracted. Now, with a blessing in disguise, I found the courage to go all in. Fortunately, my advisor still remembered me, and he encouraged me to reapply, which put my mind at ease. Breaking up wasn't my only goal. Living a better life after the breakup was my ultimate objective. I contacted my former classmates and friends, and got study materials. But focused studying required an undisturbed space, so I applied for a dorm room at the school, and moved all my study materials in. My parents thought I was moving out to make it easier to date Benjamin, so even though they didn't want me to leave, they didn't object. The dorm room conditions were very poor. It didn't have a private bathroom, and even dust fell from the ceiling, but I didn't care about the material conditions. During breaks from practice problems, I'd also open my phone. I followed Sage's social media account. She had changed her name to Inspirational Young Single Mom, and posted daily updates on her pregnancy, gaining thousands of followers. Sage lived in Benjamin's spacious apartment, enjoying a peaceful and carefree life of leisure every day. Meanwhile, I was holed up in a simple, cramped dorm room, poring over dry textbook problems. Anyone would find the former more pleasant, so when I struggled to study, I'd fall into self-doubt. What am I even doing this for? Why do I have to argue about right and wrong? If I just closed my eyes and adopted an out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach, wouldn't life still go smoothly? Just like my parents had advised me, Benjamin will mature. Once he has his own flesh and blood, he won't care whether Sage and her child live or die. But I still couldn't convince myself to bet my future on someone else's conscience. I only trusted myself. A few days later was Thanksgiving. On such holidays, the family would gather in Grandpa Henry's hospital ward, and this was exactly the opportunity one had been waiting for. The more people there were, the livelier the atmosphere. Benjamin's mother and I arrived at the hospital early to decorate. Grandpa Henry's hospital room had two sections, an outer area for guests where flowers and fruit needed to be arranged. Aunt Eleanor liked to ask me to lend a hand on such occasions. Before, I used to think it was a waste of time, but I figured if I did more, the elders would have less to do, and I saw no issue with that. But only now did it belatedly dawn on me. Why was Aunt Eleanor so particular about Benjamin? Before her son met me, had no one in the He family ever done any work? Besides, regarding fruit, couldn't whoever wanted to eat it just wash it themselves? Why did it have to be washed, cut, and arranged beforehand? Every little chore I did was actually quite meaningless. It was merely to make Benjamin's mother feel more comfortable. The source of her comfort was my obedience to her preferences. Seeing through all this, I told myself not to get angry, and to consider the bigger picture, while also confirming with my best friend the time for her to call me. So halfway through decorating, my phone suddenly rang. I mysteriously slipped away to answer it, and seeing Aunt Eleanor standing nearby in my peripheral vision, I deliberately raised my voice. "No, it has to be formaldehyde-free material, otherwise it will harm the baby. Yes, the delivery address is Maplewood Heights, Unit 1. My friend, suppressing her voice, asked me. Did that woman hear? Should I hang up now? I replied with a smile. Okay, goodbye. Ordering baby products to Benjamin's home surely meant good news. Sure enough, as soon as I hung up, Aunt Eleanor scurried over, a mix of surprise and joy on her face, hands clasped to her chest, almost twirling with delight. Grace, you truly are something. Why didn't you tell us about the good news sooner? Aren't you afraid of overworking yourself? How many months along are you now? We'll move the wedding date forward right away, to ensure you have a grand wedding before you start showing. I countered with a puzzled expression. Showing what? Aunt Eleanor, I'm not pregnant. Aunt Eleanor's smile split in half. Then what did you mean by baby and formaldehyde just now? Our eyes met, and I chuckled, slapping my forehead. It's a misunderstanding. I was talking about a friend's baby. Evidently, Benjamin's mother was a bit disappointed, but she maintained her polished and appropriate smile. Well, that's fine too. But you should still work hard. You see, Benjamin isn't getting any younger. Having a baby soon would also make Grandpa Henry happy. How could I not understand Aunt Eleanor's intentions? The firm was founded by Grandpa Henry, and now that his health was deteriorating, the family was waiting for Grandpa Henry to issue a formal document to determine the firm's successor. Although Benjamin was highly regarded, he still had an aunt, who also had a recently graduated son. At such a time, having a stable and warm family setup as a backup would earn points, which is why Aunt Eleanor had pressured her son into blind dates. Benjamin, though appearing gentle and composed, had repeatedly dodged these attempts, only agreeing when he met me. Aunt Eleanor was overjoyed because of this and looked upon me favorably. But now her plans were thwarted, because I waved my hand and chuckled. Aunt Eleanor, I'm not going to have children. Aunt Eleanor jumped, stumbled 2 steps, and almost lost her balance. You can't say such things. You're a teacher. How can you not have children? I reached back and looped my arm through Aunt Eleanor's, indicating that I had already made proper arrangements. Benjamin and I have agreed to raise his friend's child as our own. The girl plans to be a single mother and needs a father figure, and she's living at Benjamin's home right now. Once the baby is born, we can just take care of it. It's very convenient. As for me, I plan to study out of town in the future and won't have time for children. Besides, I'm afraid of my figure changing. Isn't this a win-win situation? I've already made an appointment. Next week I'll accompany Benjamin to get a vasectomy. After all, having this child will be enough for us. Don't you agree? In that moment, I admired myself for not losing my nerve and for delivering all the lines I had planned. From the reaction, I was very satisfied, because Benjamin's mother was absolutely furious, her finger pointing at me, trembling uncontrollably as she stammered. I forbid it. I pricked up my ears, wanting to hear what she forbade. Just then a burst of giggles came from outside the door. Oh, this is a great idea. Sis, young people today have advanced ideas. We must respect them. I'll go tell Dad the good news right away, and make Grandpa Henry happy too. The speaker was Benjamin's Aunt Victoria. Grandpa Henry originally had 1 son and 2 daughters. His son died young, so the family inheritance could only be passed down to his 2 daughters. The 2 sisters never got along since childhood, and as adults, they were civil but secretly at odds. Benjamin's mother, the eldest daughter, had always been favored. Although she had once broken ties with the family due to eloping, their relationship later mended, and the old man forgave his daughter. In fact, compared to his younger daughter, who had a happy marriage, the old man pitied his eldest daughter more, as she had married poorly. Benjamin's Aunt Victoria had always coveted the firm's management rights, and wanted to get her own son into the firm to compete with Benjamin. But her son carried his father's surname, and the old man's traditional thinking led him to believe that Benjamin, bearing the same surname, was closer, so he had always refused, leaving Aunt Victoria resentful. However, if Benjamin had no biological descendants, that would be different. A traditional-minded old man would absolutely not allow his assets to fall into the hands of another bloodline. If Benjamin really got a vasectomy, whether the firm would still be entrusted to him would be an unknown. I didn't agree with Grandpa Henry's traditional view on surnames, but using it to suppress Benjamin was twice as effective. So how could Aunt Victoria miss this opportunity? Laughing, she helped Grandpa Henry, who had been woken from his nap, up from the adjacent hospital room and put on his hearing aid. Dad, let me tell you a joke. Benjamin is getting a vasectomy, and he's raising someone else's child as his own, ha ha ha. Aunt Eleanor tried to cover for her son, but how could Aunt Victoria let her have her way? She immediately explained the whole story to Grandpa Henry, detailing every single aspect. Just moments ago, The room had been festive, but now the atmosphere was stiff and cold. Grandpa Henry, his voice trembling, commanded, "Call Benjamin here." I nodded subtly from behind the crowd. Yes, the show was starting. How could the main character be absent? 10 minutes later, Benjamin rushed in, apparently not too busy at the firm, arriving as soon as he was called. Benjamin hadn't even caught his breath when Grandpa Henry sternly questioned, "I hear you're keeping a pregnant woman at your home. Is the child in her belly yours?" Benjamin froze, then honestly replied, "No." "Then why are you claiming it as your own?" Sweat beaded on Benjamin's forehead. "Sage is alone with a child trying to build a career. It's very difficult for her. I just felt for her." The old man showed a look of disapproval. "He brought this upon himself. Why are you getting so agitated? Do you have too much money at home? I gave you money to buy a house so you wouldn't have to worry about family trivialities and could focus on your career, but you, on the other hand, took on another man's responsibilities." The old man had commanded the business world for decades, his authority immense. Benjamin immediately knelt on one knee before Grandpa Henry's bed and sincerely apologized. "You're right. I should prioritize my career." Grandpa Henry still had affection for this grandson. He reined in some of his anger and said, "Fine, kick that woman out, and I'll let bygones be bygones." Benjamin nodded seriously in agreement. But Aunt Victoria cleared her throat and said to me in a casual tone, "Yes, Grace, you two shouldn't be too responsible. The child's responsibility lies with its own father. Just send her back to her boyfriend's home. Why go to all this trouble?" I acknowledged her and then said, "She can't go. She has her reasons. Her boyfriend isn't divorced yet. But Benjamin is very manly. Before, Sage was getting her hair pulled and beaten by her legal wife. If Benjamin hadn't helped, she might have been beaten to death. We truly aren't at ease sending her away." It was a subtle insult masked as praise, and some people naturally understood. Grandpa Henry had just calmed down, but now he grew agitated again, coughing violently and slapping his thigh in anger. "That woman is the other woman, and you fought with her legal wife for her? Benjamin, did you consider the consequences when you did that? If someone recognized you as a manager of our firm, did you consider the firm's image?" Benjamin instinctively flinched, mumbling, "You're right, I was inconsiderate." Grandpa Henry said no more. He closed his eyes weary, then reopened them. "Aunt Victoria, inform Daniel that he's to start helping at the firm tomorrow." Benjamin's eyes widened. Grandpa Henry said, "I'm giving Daniel a chance. Let him try it too. I hope he doesn't have friends with such a lack of judgment." Benjamin had always believed himself to be the chosen one, but now he had to face the fact that he was no longer unparalleled in the eyes of his elders. One mistake gave Daniel, whose eyes had always been fixed on this opportunity, his chance. With things having escalated to this point, Grandpa Henry waved Benjamin away. He numbly shuffled out of the room, step by step, while I stepped forward and gently comforted him. "Don't be sad, a generation gap is normal." Benjamin numbly rubbed his cheeks, then suddenly asked me, "Where's Mom?" There was no need to guess. Benjamin's mother had gone to settle accounts with Sage. I deliberately suggested a few places, then finally slapped my forehead and said, "Oh no, Aunt Eleanor isn't going to confront Sage, is she?" Benjamin immediately panicked. "Damn it, my mom has a terrible temper. She absolutely mustn't give Sage a hard time." Hearing this, I surprisingly raised an eyebrow. Earlier, when Benjamin and I talked, he mentioned his mother, saying that although she had a quick temper, she was a very good person, assuring me, "You won't have to worry about mother-in-law conflicts later." So a son knew his own mother's temper perfectly. Yet why didn't he warn me, his official girlfriend, and instead worried about Sage? A female friend openly received more concern than his actual fiancé. For a friend to go as far as Benjamin did, it was truly rare. When we both rushed back home, sure enough, we saw Aunt Eleanor yelling loudly. Sage's maternity supplies were scattered everywhere, and Aunt Eleanor was throwing them and cursing. "I haven't settled the score with you for ruining my son yet. Go find whoever got you pregnant, and make them responsible. You want my son to take over the burden? No way. Oh no, he's even worse than a man who takes over a burden. At least those guys end up with a wife at home." Sage, with her slightly protruding belly, had nowhere to hide and could only stiffly repeat with a cold face, "Benjamin told me to move in." Aunt Eleanor spat. "Well, I gave birth to him, so I can control him if I want. You're living in my son's house, and I don't like seeing you around, so of course I can kick you out." There was truth to that. When Benjamin first cleaned up Sage's mess, I had considered whether to use Aunt Eleanor's influence to make him change his mind. But after much hesitation, I didn't say anything to Aunt Eleanor. Mothers naturally protect their sons. If I had complained to Aunt Eleanor and asked her to restrain Benjamin, she would have surely told me not to mind. But if I exposed this to everyone first, the effect would be different. Only when she saw tangible damage to her interests would Aunt Eleanor truly discipline her son. Otherwise, as his future daughter-in-law, I would only ever get superficial appeasements and biased mediation. I actually stepped forward to soothe the furious Aunt Eleanor. Aunt Eleanor, don't misunderstand. Benjamin and Sage are completely innocent. There's nothing going on. Even I, his fiancé, don't mind, so why are you so anxious? Aunt Eleanor glared at me, disappointed. I'm not anxious? My son is simply being manipulated by this woman. How can I not be anxious? She was throwing things around in the room, while Sage huddled in the corner, crying tears of self-pity. Benjamin finally couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward and grabbed his mother's hand. Stop it. You're making such a scene in my home. Aren't I supposed to have any dignity? Aunt Eleanor froze for a moment, looked at her son, then at me. It's probably human nature to pick an easy target. She left her son, who was unable to distinguish right from wrong, and pointed at me, criticizing. Grace, you're even more in the wrong. Why didn't you advise him? You're a woman. It's your duty to be a supportive wife and raise children. When Benjamin loses his head, you should counsel him. I almost burst out laughing. Mothers everywhere probably think their own sons are innocent and kind. Benjamin taking in Sage was his wicked intention. Benjamin's stubbornness was because I didn't advise him. Anything that harmed her son was always someone else's fault. No matter how many mistakes, her son could never be wrong. But Benjamin was also an adult. He clearly went along with it willingly, so why should I advise him? Rather than wasting my breath and making myself unhappy, I'd rather just kick him out and end it all. Be a supportive wife and raise children, I said with a sigh. Aunt Eleanor, I am being a supportive wife and raising children. Benjamin is perfectly fine, no need to interfere. As for raising children, Benjamin himself said that Sage's child is his child, so wouldn't I just be getting a child for free? It even saves me the hardship of childbirth, so of course I'm happier. I have no objections to this plan you mentioned. Benjamin has no objections. Sage also agrees, so why don't you agree? I was feigning ignorance while perfectly aware. Aunt Eleanor trembled with rage, her voice hoarse. What kind of daughter-in-law from any home dares to say she doesn't want to carry on the family line? Then why would I marry you into our home? Grace, if you're not even willing to have children, then this marriage is off. This was the exact sentence I was waiting for. Losing one's temper always needed a legitimate cause. I slapped Benjamin hard across the face. I compromised and agreed to raise Sage's child. And your mother actually thinks I'm not virtuous enough? Bah. Kicking your fiancé out of the house for a pregnant other woman. Both of you, old and young, are more excessive than the last, bullying people to this extent. Benjamin, you deserve to have no descendants. Of course, I knew I hadn't told the whole truth. Mixing truth with falsehood, it certainly had the potential to twist the truth. But had Benjamin told the truth? He had clearly personally adorned Sage with the one that got away filter. He insisted that the child of the other woman was still his, and therefore mine. He could casually dirty his home and not have to clean it, because he was tired. Though both of us were troubled by his mother, he worried more about Sage being wronged. When Benjamin was scheming for himself, did he ever for a moment consider if this was unfair to me? He couldn't think of it, or perhaps he did, but he was too lazy to worry about it. The reason he intended to marry me was probably precisely because I was low maintenance. I was quite independent and wouldn't whine or ask for hugs over trivial matters. I had a decent job that provided a certain social standing. I took care of my ailing mother without complaint and was filial enough. He had calculated everything, but he hadn't calculated that I wasn't a patient and understanding virtuous wife. Stepping out of the neighborhood, I pulled out my phone. In the chat box, Aunt Victoria and others labeled as such had sent me lengthy messages of thanks. I only replied briefly. We finally secured a fair chance to compete. Tell your brother to work harder. Benjamin's grandpa Henry was very biased. In my opinion, the two grandsons were equally capable. Daniel was even more steady and shrewd. But just because Daniel took his uncle's surname, the scales in the old man's heart tipped. What's the point of sulking after a breakup? It's much more interesting to make Benjamin frantic between his mother and Sage. Cultivating a competitor for Benjamin was even more interesting. As for me, I was truly tired of playing along. How could Benjamin think that if he pushed my limits, I would still greet him with a smile? I wasn't an eye for an eye malicious person, but once he crossed the line I had set for myself, I would bare my claws. Over the next few months, I became even busier. Graduate school exam preparation entered a critical phase, and I buried myself in studies for months, oblivious to what was happening outside. But I knew that thanks to Aunt Victoria's embellishments, the reason for our breakup had already spread as a rumor, becoming that he had no fertility. Many relatives and neighbors came to console me, and my parents echoed, "Yes, fortunately, Benjamin has a physiological problem. This is a big deal." Grace was right to break up. It escalated to the point where my parents could only say this. Benjamin couldn't explain himself. Even if he changed, who would believe him? If he could have his own child, why would he insist on raising a friend's child? Wouldn't it be that the more he explained, the worse it looked? After the breakup, I felt refreshed and invigorated, and getting the top score on the preliminary exam made it even more deeply satisfying. Although 3 years had passed, it still gave me a renewed certainty that my life was back in my control. It's not scary to take a wrong step. As long as I have the determination to correct it, everything is still salvageable. That day happened to be my best friend's daughter's birthday. I brought a gift to attend, and ran into someone at the restaurant. He was dining with his daughter, and the little girl asked in a childish voice, "Where's Daddy?" The woman tilted her head awkwardly and said, "Mommy's been too busy these past few days. I'll definitely find you a few more in a while." So was the role of Dad a consumable item that needed to be stocked up on? That day, his haughty demeanor towards Sage left a deep impression on me. And now this conversation made me couldn't help but chuckle even more. The woman noticed my expression and slowly turned around. She slowly lifted her chin. "I know you. You're that friend of Sage, right?" I waved my hands repeatedly. "Sister, you're mistaken. I'm not friends with Sage, my ex-boyfriend is." This wealthy-looking lady was even richer than she appeared. She had already finished her divorce proceedings, and her money hadn't decreased by a single cent. In fact, she had even more, because her husband had invested a significant amount in Sage's art studio, and the court ruled that this money was marital property and had to be recovered. The art studio was still open, but under new management. The house that had been given to Sage was also recovered intact. Audrey, hugging her daughter, said with a touch of anger, "He disliked that I gave birth to a daughter, saying she couldn't inherit the family business. Bah. His family business was all given by me. And he still had the nerve to despise women for not being able to inherit the family business. He knelt before me begging for forgiveness, but how could he be worthy? He kept saying my daughter was his treasure. Yet he made another woman bear him a son. He wanted all the good things in the world. He's going to face divine retribution." It was then that I realized Sage had already given birth. Audrey's husband had indeed gotten a son as he wished, and Sage had also gained a legitimate status, but this was not the high society marriage she had dreamed of, because the man she had gotten by sacrificing childbirth had already lost his own entry ticket. Audrey was a formidable woman. When she said he left with nothing, she meant she wouldn't even leave her ex-husband a single pair of underwear. To put it simply, it was said that the couple now loathed each other, and their lives were in constant chaos. Audrey and I chatted for a long time and really hit it off. Later, she would occasionally invite me out for meals and relaxation. When she learned I was studying for exams, Audrey nodded frequently and even pointed at me as she taught her daughter. "See, baby? You should study hard like Auntie." The day I got my acceptance letter, I handed in my resignation. I acted first and informed them later. I only told my parents after my resignation procedures were complete. They were naturally extremely upset, but they could no longer influence me. 3 years ago, I missed my opportunity, and 3 years later, I couldn't miss it again. Although working as a teacher in my hometown provided my basic needs and allowed me to care for my ailing mother, it wasn't the career I wanted to pursue. While I still had ambition and while my parents' health was still good, I wanted to do what I loved, and no one could stop me. Although I was 3 years late in studying my desired major, I unexpectedly discovered that working first and then studying had some benefits. For humanities and social sciences, having appropriate exposure to society allowed for a deeper understanding of theories. Many problems I encountered at work provided me with ready-made inspiration for case studies. So I enjoyed my studies greatly, and articles flowed one after another. My parents had urged me countless times to return to my hometown to work as soon as possible. What's the point of a girl studying so much? Aren't you regretful that you quit a job that people are now fighting tooth and nail to get? We heard Benjamin isn't seeing anyone yet. Do you want to? They just wouldn't understand. I believed in being polite to my parents and providing financial support, but spiritual resonance didn't need to be forced. My personal experience proved that being a supportive wife and raising children was truly not a good path, especially if you encountered a hypocritical man like my ex-boyfriend. It was a disaster. So, to avoid pressure to marry, I rarely went back home. If I had to, I'd only stay for a day or two and then leave. Having left that circle, I rarely heard news of Benjamin until one day, my advisor took me to an academic conference. The conference happened to be held in my hometown, and coincidentally, at the same hotel, Benjamin was also conducting business. We ran into each other. He looked me up and down, a surprised expression on his face. "Grace, what are you doing here?" I ignored him completely, turning directly back into the conference room. The standing sign by the door listed the attendees. I was grateful to my advisor for intentionally giving me face by assigning me a few intimidating titles, which made Benjamin's gaze toward me even more ardent than usual. After the conference, Benjamin specifically came forward to offer his business card. I wanted to pretend I didn't know him, but in front of everyone, I could only politely accept it. That evening, I went back home to stay for just one night, and Benjamin still managed to seize the opportunity to pay a visit. He was there to apologize, his demeanor extremely humble. I was wrong. Sage is full of lies and completely untrustworthy. Only you are gentle and composed and genuinely considerate of me. I leaned against the doorframe, blocking his entry. How did Sage lie? Go on, tell me, I'm very curious. Actually, I didn't need him to tell me, I could guess. The so-called "if I don't have this child, I won't be able to conceive again," was just a pretense to gain Benjamin's pity. The so-called "I'm an independent woman running an art studio," was actually funded by Audrey's philandering husband. Sage used Benjamin's financial support to have the child and secure a marriage, but this marriage, lacking a material foundation, quickly collapsed. Sage, with her child, once again asked Benjamin for shelter, and he, soft-hearted again, gave her a key. However, Aunt Victoria, seizing the opportunity, reported this to Grandpa Henry again, once more leaving Grandpa Henry utterly disappointed with Benjamin. The old man had already divided the firm in two, giving the more profitable portion to Benjamin's Daniel to manage. Daniel, living up to expectations, married a well-educated and sensible wife and, holding an ultrasound report, solemnly vowed to let the old man witness the beautiful vision of 4 generations together. Benjamin only then thought of me. After all, according to our previous plans, it would have already been our wedding date by now. Moreover, my prestigious degree was enough to completely overshadow his sister-in-law. Grace, should we get back together? If we reconcile now, it would be a story full of twists and turns, a case where good things take time, truly a good story. Was it a good story or a lie? I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. I'm sorry, but I don't think much of your proposal to reconcile. Although I'm a graduate student now, I'm not interested in being a virtuous and gentle wife as a graduate student. How can I be sure you don't have other Lin Zikias or Lin Jidongs waiting for your overly responsible self to rescue them from distress? Instead of trying to sweet-talk me, you might as well go adopt a few more godsons. My words were laced with sarcasm, and Benjamin indeed got angry, but the reason for his anger was somewhat inexplicable. You're saying if you're not interested, you just won't do it? I nodded. Exactly. Life's pretty short. I'll do whatever I want. Who can control me? Although my parents opposed my decision to quit my job and study, and though I struggled and suffered, I ultimately chose to listen to my inner voice. Everyone should adhere to such principles. But Benjamin suddenly became melancholic. Why can you achieve your dreams? Why can't I? I love painting. I wanted to be an artist, but my mom wouldn't let me. She said I had to inherit the family business and study business management. Sage walked the path I couldn't, and seeing him reminded me of my unfulfilled dreams, which is why I paid extra attention to him. But why don't you have to worry about these things? Why can you and he be so carefree? Why am I the only one who feels so stifled? By the end, Benjamin's eyes were even red-rimmed. He was clearly a 6-foot-tall man. Yet he was crying like a grown man acting like a child. I couldn't stand this self-pitying. I immediately scoffed. Then go paint. Don't inherit the family business. Just let your brother have it all. What do you mean your mom won't let you? Can she control you your entire life? It's all just your own greed. You want to achieve your dreams, but you can't bear to give up the comfortable material conditions your family provides. You want a stable marriage, yet you can't let go of that alluring other woman. The one that got away. You want this and that. Don't you ever consider, Benjamin, where do you even deserve any of it? Greed isn't a bad thing, but can you achieve your dreams just by dreaming without taking any action? Where do you find such a good deal? The truth is always harsh, and Benjamin didn't like to hear it. He was so fond of pushing responsibility onto others. How could he admit that it was his cowardice and indecisiveness that made him miss the chance to choose the life he yearned for? His expression changed several times, veins bulging on his forehead as he gnashed his teeth. Grace, you look down on me. You used to be gentle and generous, perfect homemaker material. Why have you turned into such a shrew now? I'm retracting your reconciliation offer. I could never marry someone like you. Benjamin thought these were adoring words, and that I would burst into tears and be heartbroken after hearing them, but I merely smiled faintly, feeling extremely happy. I thought Benjamin had a point. I used to come from an ordinary background, but with a respectable family background. I wasn't breathtakingly beautiful, but I had pleasant features, a decent education, and a respectable, stable job. These conditions were good enough yet not too good, which made Benjamin feel that if he married me, he could do whatever he wanted without any burden, and also made Benjamin's mother feel that she could easily control me. I was just one step away from falling into this cage of lies, disguised as marriage. But thanks to the never-fading image of the one that got away in Benjamin's heart, his constant actions finally wore out all my patience, and this also gave me the chance to turn things around. I took one last look at the man who had almost become my husband, and said calmly, "Unsuitable for marriage? Thank you. That's the best compliment I've heard in over 20 years. Don't worry, I'll keep working hard in the future, working hard not to be married into a home by someone like you."